my best friends from college, I'll call her Rachel, had what seemed to be a picture-perfect life. She had a rewarding career as a teacher. Her husband was an Ivy League professor, and they just had a baby. But then one day, I got a call from a mutual friend, and I could tell from the tone in her voice that she was about to tell me some bad news. So I stopped on the sidewalk and prepared myself. "It's Rachel," she said. The baby was crying nonstop, and she had bruises all over her body. So she took her to the doctor, and they found that she had broken bones in multiple places in her body. Eventually, her husband admitted that he had done this to the baby. So we were horrified and shocked that he would do this to them. And I was irate when the sentence came down. And he got 1 year of house arrest and 5 years of supervised visitation. 1 year of house arrest. And I was angry for 2 reasons. One, because I felt like he was getting off easy. I wanted him to be punished for what he had done. And second, I wondered if he wasn't a white man, if he wasn't an Ivy League professor, would he have gotten the sentence? Young black men are arrested every day for far less. In fact, on average, they get sentences that are 20% longer. And I'm still angry about this injustice, and that's one of the reasons why I continue to work in this area today. But I've changed my perspective on punishment. I've come to realize that fixating on punishment alone would have undermined my friend's healing and the well-being of the baby, who's now grown into a healthy teenager. Because he was able to keep working and support them, she didn't lose the house, and they were able to have financial stability. And because my friend advocated to have the visitation happen in a therapist's office, he actually had more accountability because he had to come face to face with all the impacts of what he did. And so today, I believe that our criminal justice system needs to have a more holistic focus on accountability, healing, and rehabilitation, and not just a narrow focus on punishment. Now, there's a lot of pieces of this reform that I could talk about today, but I'm going to zoom in on the transition from prison to employment, partly because I'm an employment and training specialist, and so this is one of the ways in which I feel I can have the best contribution. But also because getting a job is the best thing we can do to set someone up for success and to reduce recidivism. So it makes us all safer. Today, I'm going to talk with you about how the system works, and then I'm going to share 3 key obstacles and a solution for each. In the United States today, over 2 million people are incarcerated at any given time. That's the highest in the world, and we also have the highest rate in the world. Our incarceration rate puts us next to countries like Rwanda that have a history of genocide. Compared to our peer countries that are industrialized, wealthy nations in the OECD, our incarceration rate is 4.8 times higher. In addition, we have increased the incarcerated population by 500%. Now, to me, this says this is not a natural outcome. This is a cultural choice. This is a policy choice, and we can change it. But we have to really be cognizant that this system is deeply ingrained in long histories of racial segregation and inequality. Today, 1 in 3 black boys is likely to be in prison in their lifetime, and 1 in 17 white boys. And this inequality comes in at every stage, whether it's who is arrested, how long a sentence is, or what someone experiences when they come out. So we have to put race at the center of this reform if we're ever to really change it. This system costs us $80 billion a year, and it has very mixed results in terms of whether it actually reduces crime. We release about 650,000 people every year into our communities, but within 3 years, 2/3 of those people will have been rearrested. So we have a cycle going on here, and we're not breaking it. Getting a job is the best thing you can do to set someone up for success, but at any given time, around 60% of people who have a record are not stably employed. So I'm going to go into some obstacles here to that employment. And the first one is the scale of access to reentry support and education. So not only do we spend very, very little on reentry support and education for those who are incarcerated, but also that spending is extremely haphazard. So whether you have access to anything at all could vary tremendously from one place to the other. But it's not as if we don't have programs that are really promising. Right here in San Quentin, there's a program called Prison to Employment Connection, and they've managed to bring recidivism down to only 1%. Now compare that to the 67%, and it's a pretty dramatic difference. But again, the problem is this program to date has only served about 300 people. So overall, it ends up being a really tiny little drop in the bucket. So the question is, how do you scale this access to this curricula to a lot more people? My colleague, Dr. Rayshawn Ray, and I believe that you can use new technologies like virtual reality to make that curricula available to a lot more people. So the idea is we would bring programs like the curricula for Prison to Employment Connection into the VR environment, and then we would test it to make sure it works well, and then bring it to scale. We like virtual reality because it doesn't require an internet connection, so for those who are still inside, it gets around some of the security concerns. It's also relatively cheap to get a set of goggles. So how it would work is like this. You rent the goggles from a cart in the library, and then you might have access to a job interview, like you'll see here on the screen, like a mock interview. Or you could have mentoring sessions with someone who's in a particular industry who can share with you very specific tips about how to get into that industry with a record. And that could go all the way up to a more structured educational class, like getting a GED, getting a bachelor's degree, or even doing the educational portion of an apprenticeship, which allows the learner to earn it while they learn. Right now, we're working with Marcus Bullock of Flickshop, who has started his own business school based on his own experience being incarcerated. And we want to bring his curricula into the VR environment and test it in different regions. We're looking for partnership support to begin to expand this project right now. The second barrier that maybe you haven't thought of is red tape. So if you've ever been to the DMV, you may have an inkling of what I'm talking about here, but you wait 2 hours in line, you get to the front, and then you're missing a document. And so then you have to go find the document. You take that experience and multiply it by about 20, because someone coming out of prison is going to be looking for support getting housing, maybe some career services, maybe some transportation to get to the job, and maybe enrolling in health insurance. These are all actually separate agencies, and right now you have to apply for these things separately. And many people can't find their birth certificate or their Social Security card. So this becomes a huge barrier that people get buried under at a really critical point. When they first come out, they should be focusing on getting to reconnect with their family, reconnect with their network, and build that life. But they're getting buried in red tape. So the solution that I propose is that we issue a state ID to everyone before they're released. And moreover, that we enroll them in any programs that they're eligible for before their release. Now this sounds kind of simple and straightforward, but actually it's a lot of work that has to go in the background. One, because those systems, some of them are 40 years old. They don't talk to each other. Second, because 88% of people are in state-run prisons, you could pass a federal rule, but you'd have to implement that rule 50 separate times. And you're talking about the technology, redesigning the process. So we need to do the work on the back end to make it easier on the front end. And the last obstacle that I'll share with you today is where you and I come in on the outside, and that's stigma. Now, stigma shows up in the prison to employment process in two key ways. One is in the hiring process, and another is in the professional networks. But before I get into that, I want to point out that racial stereotypes and stereotypes about criminality are deeply interconnected. So in the cities that have passed ban-the-box laws, which prohibit an employer from asking if someone has a record in the initial application, researchers have found that actually increased racial discrimination. And that's because people are using race as a proxy for having a record. So these are really difficult, tricky issues to disentangle. The solution is what people in the reentry community call proximity. So this means get beneath the label, get beyond the stereotype, and get to know the person. For example, if you, instead of excluding someone in a blanket exclusion of anyone who has a record, look at the job that you're hiring for ahead of time and identify what types of records are and aren't acceptable for it. For example, if you're trying to hire for a driver, you wouldn't want someone with a DUI, but another kind of record would probably be fine. Also, in the interview process, if you find out someone does have a record, ask them to show you evidence of their rehabilitation. And if they can show you that, then that's probably a much better determination of what they would be like as an employee than whether or not they have a record. Professional networks come in because most people get a job through someone they know. And yet, when you're coming out of prison, you actually have a pretty weak network, so you're at a disadvantage from the beginning. This is Shelley Winner. After being incarcerated for about 1.5 years on a drug charge, she was applying for a position at the corporate offices in Microsoft, and there were concerns about her record. She told me when we were doing an event at Brookings with her that it wasn't because of her skills that she was ultimately hired. It was because there was a mid-level manager there who vouched for her. He took the time to get to know her, and when they questioned her record, he stood up for her. So there's a lot that we can all do to get to know someone and vouch for them at the right time, or to volunteer at your local reentry organization and be a mentor to someone, be a network for someone. To sum it up, I want to return back to my friend's ex-husband and the opportunities that he had for real accountability, for healing through therapy and rehabilitation. I've come to believe that we can't set people up for success after prison unless everyone gets access to those opportunities. We need to build a justice system that we can believe in, that we can trust. So when someone comes out, we know that they've paid their debt to society and they're ready to contribute. I've shared with you 3 solutions for improving transitions from prison to employment, using new technologies to scale access to reentry support and education, cutting the red tape by providing IDs and enrolling people in programs prior to release, and breaking down the stigma by getting underneath the stereotypes and the labels to get to know the person. Instead of blaming the individual for the failures of a system, we need to focus more on closing the opportunity gap. It's going to take a collective movement to dismantle the structural racism in our institutions, in our labor markets, and in our society. And it's going to take a collective effort to break the cycles of violence in our relationships, our families, and our communities. We can make a different choice to reinvent our justice system, but it's going to come down to us, all of us. Thank you.